All right, in section 1.6, we're going to start talking about multiplying and dividing real numbers. First thing we got to think of multiplication and division. If the signs are different, my answer is negative. Like, I don't care which number is bigger. It's just that if the signs are different, the answer is negative. If the signs are the same, so I'm talking about two positives or two negatives, if the signs are the same, my answer will be positive. So looking at this example, first, let me multiply my numbers. 8 times 5. We know our multiplication, 8 times 5 is 40. Now, because the signs are different, my answer will be negative 40. Same thing here. Negative 9 times 1/3. Let me just multiply my numbers. Just one thing that I want to emphasize here. When a whole number and a fraction are being multiplied, let me just make this, one thing we can do, there's two things we can do. We have to do. One, we're going to have to multiply to the top numbered, and we're going to have to divide to the bottom number. It doesn't matter which one we do first. We can go 9 times 1, and our result we divided by 3, or we could go 9 divided by 3, and the result we multiply by 1. Like I said, we have to do both operations. It doesn't matter which one we do first. Any order that you do, 9 times 1 divided by 3, or 9 divided by 3 times 1, your numbers should be 3. And then looking at the signs, one of them is negative, the other one's positive. Signs are different. My answer would be negative 3. Now here, let me just multiply first. 6.2 times 4.1. And we know that in decimals, let me just write this. 6.2 times 4.1. We want to multiply it, ignoring the decimal points. I am going to go 1 times 2, 1 times 6. Then at the bottom, I'm going to start 1 to the left. 4 times 2, 4 times 6. I add my numbers. This is 14, so I carry the 10. This is 5, this is 2. Right, I multiplied, ignoring the decimals. Now, my decimals, I see that this has 1 decimal place, and I call decimal place those numbers after the decimal point. So this has 1 decimal place, this one has 1 decimal place. Combined is 2 decimal places, so my answer should be 25.42, numbers-wise. Now, when it comes to signs, the signs are different, right? Negative times positive, so my answer is negative. Negative 25.42. So remember, if the signs are the same, my answer is positive. If the signs are different, my answer is negative. Now here, let me multiply my numbers first. 9 times 2, that's 18. The signs are the same, so positive 18. Here, when I have fraction, I just multiply straight across. So 2 times 3, I have 6. 3 times 2, I have 6. 6 divided by 6, because remember a fraction is division. 6 divided by 6 is 1. Notice how I just did numbers-wise. I ignore the signs. I just multiply my numbers. Now, when it comes to signs, negative times a negative, the sign is the same. My answer is positive 1. Here, let me multiply these numbers. I'm just going to go 1.25 times 0.5. I get 25, so carry the 20. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 2 is 12, carry the 10. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 1 is 6. Now, my first number is 2 decimal places. This one's 1. Combined is 3 decimal places. So 0.625. Numbers-wise, we can put a 0 before it. So numbers-wise is 0.625. Now, when it comes to signs, negative times a negative is positive. So my answer in this case is positive 0.625. So first multiply your numbers, and then worry about the sign. Take a look at an example here about reciprocals. The pairs of numbers whose product is 1 are reciprocals, or sometimes we call those multiplicative inverses. What we basically do for a reciprocal, here to have 4, we can make this into a fraction, right? We can put a 1 at the bottom. 4 is the same thing as 4 over 1. A reciprocal, we just switch the numbers. So 4 over 1 becomes 1 over 4. Negative 5, I can put a 1 at the bottom. So no, just look at the numbers for right now. Ignore the sign. 5 over 1 becomes 1 over 5. It's just that because we have a negative sign, we're just going to put it at the front. 0.3 is the same thing as 3 over 10, right? Because we can write that as a fraction. But remember, reciprocal, just switch the numbers. So 10 over 3. Same thing here. Negative 5 over 8. It's already written as a fraction. So I'm going to call it negative 8 over 5. Reciprocal, all we do, we switch the numbers. And the one on the top goes to the bottom, and the one from the bottom goes to the top. Do not switch the signs. Notice how I kept this negative. Here, I kept this negative. So once again, reciprocal, just switch the numbers. Just flip the numbers. Do not change the sign. All right, let's take a look at this. Find each quotient. Quotient means division. So we're going to divide. 8 divided by negative 2. It seems like, hold on, let me go here. A division, we're gonna convert it to a multiplication, but we're gonna do the reciprocal of the second number. So here, kind of like 15 divided by 3 is the same thing as 15 times 1/3. So a division is a multiplication of the first number and the reciprocal of the second number. So 8 divided by negative 2, I'm going to go 8 times a negative 1/2. If you guys can see 8 divided by 2, you guys are comfortable with the division, by all means, just go for it. 8 divided by 2, or 8 times 1/2, right? I'm looking at numbers wise. I'm ignoring the sign for right now. This gives me 4. Numbers wise is 4. Now when it comes to signs, the signs are different, so my answer is negative. Here, numbers wise, 100 divided by 5, we know that's 20, numbers wise. Now when it comes to the signs are different, my answer is negative. Once again, we don't care which one is bigger, we just care of the signs being different. Looking at my example C, let me move this a little bit to the top right there. Looking at my example C, I'm going to go 4.5 divided by 0.09. So we can do 4.5 divided by 0.09. We don't want decimals on the outside, so let me move my decimal point twice to the right. Same thing in here. So I want to write this as 9 into 450. So numbers wise, I get 50. Numbers wise. Now when it comes to signs, the signs are the same, so my answer is positive 50. Here, I'm going to call this negative 1/8 times negative 4 over 3. Notice how my second number, my second fraction, I did the reciprocal. Because remember, the division is the times the reciprocal of the second number. So I'm just going to multiply straight across. But before I multiply straight across, I can simplify. And what I mean with simplify, I'm going to choose a number from the top and a number from the bottom. It could be from the same fraction or different fractions. Number from the top and a number from the bottom. And I'm going to divide it by the same thing. In this case, I'm going to divide each by 4. So this is 1. This is 2. Now I can multiply my numbers. On the top, I have 1 times 1. At the bottom, 2 times 3. My signs are the same, so my answer is positive 1/6. Now, dividing numbers, remember the signs are the same, my answer is positive. Signs are the same, my answer is positive. The tricky thing is when we have a 0. If the 0 is on top, 0 divided by anything, my answer is 0. But when the 0 is at the bottom, anything divided by 0, we're going to call that undefined. If you guys can check on your calculators, it's either going to say error, undefined, or it will say cannot do. We can never divide by 0. All right, so let's take a look at something here. I have a multiplication here. Negative 9 times 2, I'm going to call that negative 18, right? Different signs, so it's negative. Let me do this multiplication here. Negative 3 times 2, I'm going to call that negative 6. And there's a minus in between. So negative 18 minus a negative 6. Remember earlier I said on the previous section, I said change that to a plus and change the sign of the following number. So negative 18, just to clear this up, I have negative 18 plus 6, so negative 12. All right, we know how to add different signs. I know how to do a group first. So my second example, I'm not doing anything to the -6. I'm not doing anything to the 2. I'm just working my group. 3 minus 5 is -2. Now I see a multiplication here. 2 times -2, that's -4. So I have -6 plus a -4. I'm going to call that -10. And the same thing here. I'm going to have 3 minus 8 inside. I know we haven't talked about absolute values, but it's here. Absolute values, when we have this lines right here, absolute values, if you notice I have absolute value -5. Absolute value means make the number on the inside positive. So I'm going to call this 5 minus, notice how I just work that sign, that little number, 5. Let me copy the minus that comes after. You notice how I copy it there. And then multiplication afterwards, I have 2 minus 6. So that's a -12. I'm just going to change this to plus positive. 5 plus 12, I'm going to call that 17. Let me work my fraction over here. Let me work this operation first. 5 times a -2, that's -10, minus 12. Notice how I multiplied 3 times 4. So -10 minus 12. At the bottom, if you notice, I have 2 times -5, right? That's my group. 2 times -5, I'm going to call that -10. I can simplify the top a little, right? -10 minus 12. Let me call that -22 over -10. When the signs are the same, I'm just going to call it positive. 22 over 10. I'm not going to, 10 doesn't go evenly to 22, but at least let's make my number smaller. Let's divide each by 2. So I'm going to leave my answer as 11 over 5. If we cannot divide them evenly, at least let's make our number smaller. Now let's evaluate here. Wherever I see an x, I'm going to call it -1. Wherever I see a y, I'm going to call it -2. And wherever I see an m, I'm going to call it -3. So I have 3 times a -1 plus 4 times a -2 inside a big group. My second group is -2 times a -3. So I have -3 plus a -8. And then in here I have +6. Notice I'll multiply negative times a negative. -3 plus a -8, that's -11. And 11 times 6 is going to give me -66. Let me work the example B. I'm going to have 2 times -1 squared minus 3 -2 squared. I know before I multiply, I have to do exponents. -1 squared, that's -1 times -1. That's +1. Minus 3 times 4. Right, -2 squared is 4. I know 2 times 1 is 2. 3 times 4 is 12. 2 minus 12 is -10. And then here, just for room, let me erase all this stuff. I have 4 times -2 squared plus a -1 all over -3. So let me work this -2 squared. That's -2 times -2, which is 4. So I have 4 times 4 plus a -1. That's basically 16 plus a -1. So I'm just going to call that -15. I mean +15. Notice how I would just simplify the top, 15. At the bottom is a -3. So my last part is a division. 15 divided by 3 is 5. The signs are different, so it's -5. That's what I will get. Now we're going to be looking at our words and phrases. The word product means times. So we're going to be looking at multiplication in words. So the product of, that means times, I'm going to be multiplying -5 and -2. So in fact, let me use parentheses so that way I can separate them. I'm going to be multiplying -5 times -2. All right, first, I'm just going to write the numerical expression. Times, well, times means times, that's multiplication. So 13 times -4. Right, I'm only going to use parentheses on the negatives just to help us identify the negatives. Twice, that's another multiplication, but twice means multiply by 2. So twice 6, I'm going to go 2 times 6. Triple is another multiplication, but in this case, multiply by 3. So triple forward is 3 times 4. Of, that's another word that we use in math for multiplication, like 13% of 40, when we talk about percentages. So of means times. It's also used in fractions. So 1/2 of 10, I'm going to go 1/2 times 10. Percent of, there's another of, 12% of -16. Percent, we usually write that as a decimal. We'll move the decimal twice to the left. So 0.12 times -16. And as much as, that's also the multiplication, 2/3 as much as 30, we're going to go 2/3 times 30. Okay, now we're ready to simplify this. And I said multiplication, let me look at the numbers first. 5 times 2 is 10. If the signs are the same, we keep it as positive. Now here, numerically, 13 times 4, I'm going to get 52. Right, I'm just multiplying my numbers. Because the signs are different, my answer is -52. Here, 2 times 6, we know that as 12. 3 times 4, sorry for that. 3 times 4, that's also 12. Remember I mentioned before in a previous section, when we have a fraction, we multiply to the top and we divide to the bottom. It doesn't matter which one we do first. I'm going to go 10 divided by 2. In my case, let me divide first. I like to divide first if possible. That way I'm dealing with smaller numbers. 10 divided by 2 is 5 times 1. Here, 0.12 times -16. We know multiplication. Let me multiply at the side. 16 times 12. Right? I'm going to ignore the decimal point. 2 times 6 is 12. Carry the 10. And this is 32. 1 times 6. 1 times 1. When I add my numbers, I get 192. So 192. Now, decimal places, I have 2 decimal places. So from the right, I'm going to go twice to the left. So 1.92, the signs are different. So my answer is -1.92. And on my last example, multiplying on the top and then divide with the bottom. Right? Doesn't matter which one we do first. Let me divide first. Once again, I like to divide because that's easier. 30 divided by 3 is 10. And 10 times 2 gives us 20. So that's in words. So that's pretty simple. Multiplication in words. So let's take a look at an example. Write a numerical expression for each phrase and then simplify. First, I see the product. So I'm multiplying 12 and, so let me start with 12 times because I'm going to multiply what comes after. After I see the sum of 3 and -6. Because I want all that together, let me do a parentheses. 3 plus a -6. Okay. We know I have to do groups first. So I'm not going to do anything to my 12. 3 plus a -6, we know that's a -3. Because remember, in addition, we subtract them, they have different signs. We subtract them, keep the sign of the large one. Now, at the end, 12 times 3 numerically, it's 36. Signs, the signs are different, so my answer should be negative 36. My next example, twice the, so I'm going to start with 2 times twice the difference between 8 and negative 4. I know difference is minus. I'm going to be subtracting 8 and a negative 4. And I know we said in when we have a minus, when we have subtraction, we're going to switch the subtraction to plus, but we're also going to switch the sign of the number that comes after. Let me see, this thing froze for a minute. Just waiting for it to come back. Once again, subtraction, instead of 8 minus, we're going to change that to plus, or we're going to switch the sign that comes after. So plus 4. Once again, I'm not going to do anything to the 2 times because I have to do groups first. 8 plus 4 is 12. And then to finish this, 2 times 12 is 24. Now here, 2/3 of the sum of negative 5 and negative 3. So I'm not going to do anything to my 2/3. And then here to have negative 8. Once again, when I see a number in a fraction, multiply to the top, divide with the bottom. I'm not going to be able to divide. 8 divided by 3 is not that simple. So at least let me multiply to the top. 8 times 2 is 16. Remember, I have my 3 at the bottom. Once again, I cannot divide because 3 doesn't go evenly. So I'm just going to leave it as a fraction. But I'm going to make sure to keep my negative sign, right? Positive times a negative gives me negative 16 over 3. Now here, lastly, 15% off, so 0.15 times the difference between 14 and negative 2. 14 minus a negative 2. Difference of 14 and negative 2. I know I said the minus, change it to plus, change the sign that comes after. So I have 0.15 times 16. We can multiply that at the side. Let's say it's 16 times 15. That's 30. That's 8. 6, 1. So it happens to be 240. I have 2 decimal places, so it's 2.4. Signs are positive, so they're the same. So I'm just going to leave it as 2.4. Okay. Now, let's take a look at quotient. Quotient means division. Let's take a look in words. The quotient of, so I'm going to be dividing. I can either write my division as like this. I'm going to be dividing negative 24 and 3. Another way we can write division is as a fraction. We can write that as negative 24 over 3. Like however you guys want, it's the same thing. Either way, my answer should be negative 8. Right? 24 divided by 3 is 8. Signs are different, so negative. So this next one, I'm going to write it as a fraction. Negative 16 divided by negative 4. I know numerically 16 divided by 4 is 4 because the signs are the same. My answer is positive. Ratio is another thing of division. I'm going to write once again as a fraction. I'm going to be dividing 2 divided by 3. There's nothing I can do because 3 is not going to 2. Right? I cannot simplify my numbers. So just 2 over 3. So those are basically what we mean with division. Let's take a look at an example in words for division. So write a numerical expression for each phrase and simplify the expression. The quotient of, to begin with, quotient, remember I said, is division. And division, I'm going to write it as a fraction. I'm going to divide 14. And after the word then, I see a big phrase, the sum of negative 9 and 2. So at the bottom of the fraction, I'm going to go at negative 9 plus 2. Let me deal with the group at the bottom. Because remember, in a fraction, if one side is not simplified, that's a group. So I have 14 over negative 7. Signs were different, so that's why I subtracted, kept the sign of the large one. Now here, 14 divided by 7, Numerically, I can do that. 14 divided by 7 is 2. The signs are different, so negative 2. Let's take a look at example B. The product of, I'm going to be multiplying 5 and negative 6. It says divided by the difference between negative 7 and 8. So negative 7 minus 8. Remember, difference means minus. But remember I said a minus, we're going to call this plus a negative 8. So if we look at the top only, 5 times negative 6, that gives us negative 30. At the bottom, negative 7 and a negative 8, that gives us negative 15. So when it comes to numbers only, 30 divided by 15, that's 2. Signs, because they're the same, it's positive. My answer is positive 2. Lastly, let's see. Let's take a look at this one. Write each sentence with symbols using x as the variable. So here we're going to start with 3 times. So 3 times a numbered. So 3 times x, right? We're going to see a numbered. So we don't know what number is, so we're going to put it with x. 3 times a numbered is, that's the word equals, that represents equals, negative 18. We don't have to simplify, we don't have to solve it, we're just writing it. Instructions are write each sentence with symbols. So I don't need to solve. Now here for B, I have the sum of, just to begin with, the sum of, I know that's plus. I'm going to be adding a numbered and 9. So I'm going to, a numbered and 9. That's what I'm adding. And then at the end, I see the words is 12. So equals 12. My example C, I have the difference between, so difference, I know it's minus, and I'm going to be subtracting a numbered and 5. So x minus 5. At the end of my sentence, I see is 0. So equals 0. Lastly, I have the quotient of, a quotient, remember it's division. I'm going to write my division as a fraction, and I'm dividing 24 and a numbered. So 24 over x. And then I see finishes with is negative 2. So that's pretty much it.